Hello, fellow enthusiast of the unknown. I'd like to welcome you to All Things Cryptid. I am your host, Amanda Winter, and today we're traveling to the Ozarks. I've driven through parts of the Ozarks twice, and they are so beautiful. I would love to go back and visit. Primarily, the Ozarks cover significant parts of Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, even extending into the extreme southeastern corner of Kansas. Physically, it's the Ozarks' mix of forest, rivers, and lakes that make it a destination for outdoor enthusiasts, noted for its abundance of water resources, karst features, and for its steep and rugged terrain. The region bears striking physical similarities to Appalachia in general, and the Cumberland Plateau in particular. It has a rich history that includes captivating myths and legends. There's also a man-made lake, the Lake of the Ozarks, and legend has it that the Lake of the Ozarks is haunted by tales of ghostly apparitions, phantom boat sightings, disembodied voices, and so many other things that I've decided to make that a whole episode in itself. So stay tuned for that coming up eventually. Today, though, we're going to be talking about several of the cryptids that have been seen in the Ozarks. The first cryptid that we're going to be talking about is the Ozark howler, also known as the devil cat or the black howler. The Ozark howler is believed to inhabit the deep woods of the Ozark, with its territory extending from southern Missouri to northern Arkansas, and sightings even reported in Oklahoma and Texas. This cryptid is often described as a large, bear-like creature with dark, shaggy fur covering its body. Some liken its size to that of a black bear, while others describe it as larger and more resembling a mountain lion or a panther. Most describe it as having red eyes, but its most distinctive feature is its eerie, loud howl, which is said to send chills down the spine of those who hear it. Encounters with the Ozark howler are often described as brief and fleeting, leading witnesses to describe the creature as stealthy and elusive. It is said to move swiftly through the forest, making it challenging to observe or track. The Ozark howler is primarily reported to be nocturnal, with the majority of sightings occurring during the twilight hours or in the dead of night. This behavior aligns with the creature's legend as a creature of darkness. While far more people have heard the howls than seen the creature, there have been many reported sightings of the Ozark howler over the years, mostly from hunters, hikers, campers, and residents who live near the woods. The first encounter is said to be that of Daniel Boone, the famous frontiersman who explored and settled the lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. While hunting in the Ozarks, legend has it that he and the creature ran into each other deep in the forest of Missouri. There are a couple of different accounts of what happened next, but the one that is most reported is that Daniel Boone raised his rifle and shot the creature. None of the stories consistently say if he killed it or not, but one of the stories actually dates back from a supposed letter that Daniel wrote to a sister-in-law living back in Kentucky after a hunting trip a few miles to the north of what is today Cuba, Missouri. This was in 1810. I leave you with an alarming story of a black creature I found and wounded on the Solder Creek, black and swarthy with horns on its scalp. Ignorant of its name, I am told of the sound it makes with a terrible howling in the night. Warnings of this for the settlers should be passed along. Your humble servant, Daniel Boone. According to another tale, Daniel Boone killed a howler while on a hunting trip near the Platte River in 1816, but I only found that a couple of times mentioned when doing the research. But here are a few more stories that I wanted to share that I came across. This is from 1946 in Red Oak, Oklahoma. It seems that a good number of soldiers were coming back home to try to make a living after the war and had built some new houses outside of town in order to start their new families. Apparently something was disturbed with some of the new houses that were made and let residents know how upset it was. The description that they gave was the classic Ozark howler, tall, about 4 feet at the shoulder, thick and shaggy fur, sort of like a thick cat in its build, or perhaps a thin bear with glowing red eyes, not like the yellow or the orange reflection you get from a cat's eyes at night, and making a creepy kind of howling noise, very deep and guttural. Some of the old hunters said it reminded them of an elk bugling, but at a lower pitch. In the 1950s, residents reported seeing a black goat-shaped feature roaming the Ozark forest. In the 1980s, well, I'm not even sure when, but in the 1980s, a truck driver who had pulled off to the side of the road for the night saw what he described as a black, cat-like creature with a long tail, shaggy fur, a stocky build, a beard, and red eyes. This is from an account from someone living in Fort Smith, Arkansas in 2004. This is what he said. I first heard reasonable eyewitnesses talk about the Arkansas howler in 2004 when I was living in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Several people that I talked to who had seen it or heard it or found its prints did not believe it to be a real monster, but instead thought that it was a mountain lion or a cougar that was loose in the Boston Mountains that stretch from Fort Smith and Van Buren on the south and the booming northwest Arkansas corridor. Wildlife authorities maintained at the time that there was no native cougars left in Arkansas. Nevertheless, residents who lived in and along the fringes of the Boston Mountains, which are part of the Ozarks, were serious in their claims that a large animal was roaming their neighborhoods. In April of 2006 in Oregon County, Missouri, this was what was written. A friend of mine got up very early in the morning, about 4:30 a.m., and when he went outside, he noticed his livestock were very frightened and had huddled in a cluster in the corner of the fence by his house. He had some binoculars, so he took a look in the direction for which they had run. He said what he saw looked like a big, black panther. He quickly changed his mind when he began walking down to his field and saw the thing running along his fence line. He said that it had very long ears or horns and was black with thick fur, and it had a long tail like a cat, but looked like a mix between a cat and a dog. It was broad and about as big as a Great Dane, and it had eerie reddish eyes that gave him chills. There is no reason for him to make up such a story, and he was very shaken up after the sighting. In 2009, Arkansas, a ranger on duty at a remote Arkansas station told a reporter recently that she believed Ozark howlers were real. In fact, she'd recently seen one. It was late at night and something big and black darted out in front of my vehicle, she said. I stopped to get a closer look, and I couldn't believe what I saw. A huge black panther. It snarled at me before it disappeared into the woods. Although the ranger reported the incident to her supervisors, she said that Arkansas Fish and Game Department refused to acknowledge the existence of the creatures because no one had ever caught one or removed a carcass. Despite reportedly hundreds of sightings, the Arkansas Fish and Game Department state that the legendary Ozark howlers were pet panthers that had escaped captivity. This is from a date unknown in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Last year, around New Year's, I was driving home after a party, and I was going around this curve, which is really tight, especially at night after a party, you know what I mean? And I saw this big thing run across the road right in front of me, caught in the headlights. I didn't see a whole lot, but the one thing that I did notice is that it had a big, long tail. At first, I thought it was a bear, but then I thought, wait, do bears have big tails? I couldn't remember for a while, but then I remembered that they don't. I was pretty confused and a little scared, so I just started my car right back up and went home. This is also date unknown from Jasper, Arkansas. I'd seen this creature very close to Jasper, Arkansas. I had lived in the Arkansas Ozarks for over 20 years. I never knew what it was until recently doing research, and I do believe I know where they are. I first had visual sightings of one off Highway 65 on Highway 256, heading towards Welcome Home. When I saw it, I couldn't believe my eyes. I'd never seen anything like it. What shocked me the most, and what was the most memorable, was the horns coming out of its forehead. Very much cat-like, but it was its face and its horns that really shocked me. I drove as if in shock from a car crash, not believing what I saw, until I started doing research on the subject. For over 10 years, in a remote region close to the Mountain View, Arkansas, you can hear the howl every single night, usually after midnight. I never knew what it was until I did the research. It's very elk-like, almost like a horn, but definitely a howl. If anyone is brave enough, I could show you exactly where to go and hear this, and where I made visual contact. Now, I couldn't find out who this person was because I straight up would contact this person and be like, dude, show me. In October 2014, a motorist in Benton County, Arkansas, reported that he nearly collided with an unidentified animal at Pump Station Road in Springdale. He described it as bear-like, gray, fast-running animal with horns. In 2016, a group of friends camping near Lake Tenkiller in Oklahoma claimed that they heard loud howls and saw glowing eyes in the dark. They also found large paw prints and scratch marks on their car. In August 2017, a couple hiking near Branson in Missouri said they saw a large black animal with horns crossing a road. They said that it looked like a cross between a bear and a goat. This is from Vox magazine, November 2021 issue. Sean Patrick Fay, a Missouri resident of 19 years, didn't expect to lock eyes with a cryptid when he went to explore the Route 66 ghost town of Plano. I hope I said that right. This past April. While in the town, he looked across the nearby field and spotted a large black cat. Fay said the cat was about 6 feet long and about 4 or 5 foot tall. It moved like a wildcat, like a panther or a jaguar or cougar, Fay says. This cat was a giant cat, and it was out of place. The creature looked at Fay, but he wasn't unsettled. Rather, he admired the creature until it wandered off. Fay says he has always been intrigued by cryptids, but he had to research the big cat to identify what he claims to have witnessed. I believe in those kind of things, Fay says. I had just never heard of the folklore of the Ozark Howler before. In 2015, now we're going back a little bit, in 2015, the legend received a lot of attention when a local television station in Arkansas reported they had received photographs of the creature from a viewer, John Myers. John was quoted in the news leader saying, "Met some family in Devil's Den State Park this weekend for some camping. We were up near Yellow Rock Trail Head this morning and saw this thing chase a squirrel up a tree, and I'd never seen anything like it. It had short black fur, a broad nose, and horns like a young deer, but it moved like a cat, and it had a long tail. Don't know what else it could be but the howler. It was yelping and scratching at the tree, and I got this pretty good photo when it stopped and turned to look at me. Wish I had a video or more photos, but it disappeared too fast. You can give me a call. I'm an electrician, so I'm usually available to talk for a minute." The station contacted the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, who dismissed the photos as a hoax because they felt the photos were heavily photoshopped. However, some people still believe that the photos are real. I will put them up on our social media pages so you could see for yourself. I'll also post a photo that an unknown artist did when given all the descriptions of the Ozark Howler. It reminds me of the Beast from Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and I'm just going to let you know that if it looks like what this picture looks like and I ever run across it, I'll just die out in the Ozarks because I try to pet or hug that thing. So, moving on. The next Ozark cryptid that we're going to briefly talk about is the Snoffus. The Snoffus is described as an all-white, deer-like creature, but much larger. The Snoffus is usually reported to have plum or dogwood branches in full bloom growing from its head instead of antlers. Some say it could jump into the treetops with ease, while others grant it feathery wings that it can just fly without making a sound at all, much like an owl. The blue haze that hangs over the Ozark Mountains in the fall and winter is attributed to the exhalations of the Snoffus, which is believed to emit spirals of blue smoke when it breathes. The smoke then spreads and settles over the mountains. There are some who say that seeing the Snoffus is an omen of death, that if you see it, you're going to die soon. The cryptid itself is not dangerous, just the bad omen. While researching the Snoffus origins, I found one story that says that an orchardist captured the Snoffus, grafting the branches of an Arkansas black apple tree to its skull. Another tale says a hunter wandered into the woods, ran out of bullets, and elected to load his rifle with plum pits instead. Spotting an albino deer, the hunter fired, hitting the animal in the head. Though it fell to the ground, the deer got up and ran. He later heard tales of a white buck roaming the area with plum trees replacing antlers. So while looking at the descriptions of the Snoffus, to me, it honestly looked like the most beautiful cryptid that you probably never want to see. I'll post some artist pictures of that as well. So, now we're going to be talking about the Gowrow. The Gowrow may owe its origins more to journalism than to traditional narrative and folk belief. The principal documentation of the creature's existence is a story that appeared in the Arkansas Gazette on January 31st, 1897. Apparently written by Elbert Smithy, Elmer Elmer provided an illustration allegedly based on a photograph to accompany the piece. Fred W. Alsop, who edited the Gazette at the time, recounted the circumstances that led to Smithy's story. William Miller, a Little Rock businessman who had been traveling in the Ozarks of northwest Arkansas, told Smithy of a horrible monster known as the Gowrow. Its name came from the noise it made during its nocturnal movements. The creature had been slaughtering livestock and pets near Searcy County in the Calf Creek Township. Miller formed a posse and tracked the Gowrow to its lair, a cave littered with animal skeletons and even some human remains. As they waited to ambush the monster, they heard it emerge from a nearby lake, causing the earth to tremble as it made its way toward them. The Gowrow perished after several volleys from the posse. Before its death, it ripped up several trees and tore the leg off of one of the posse members. An examination of the remains revealed a creature 20 foot in length with 2 tusks, large webbed feet ending in claws, a row of short horns along its back, and a long thin tail with a blade at the end. Williams claimed to have sent the body to the Smithsonian Institution, but it never arrived at the Washington, D.C. Museum. Alsop dismissed the account. It was a great fake, probably without foundation, in fact. The Ozark research of folklore collector Vance Randolph revealed additional details about the Gowrow, which he believed to have been reported as early as the 1880s. Randolph's sources suggest that the Gowrow was a species of creature rather than an individual monstrosity. The young hatched from soft-shelled eggs as large as beer kegs, and the mother carried newly hatched infants in a pouch. Randolph related a story about an encounter with a Gowrow by a splunker exploring Devil's Hole in Boone County. He also told of someone from Polk County who claimed to have captured a Gowrow by inducing the creature to eat so many dried apples that it swelled to a size that prevented it from escaping its burrow. The Gowrow's captor was exhibiting his catch to anyone who would pay a quarter to see it. Once he had sufficient audience, the man would stagger from behind a curtain with his clothes in rags, announcing that the Gowrow had escaped. This sent the crowd into a panic, without having to produce an actual Gowrow or give the money back. Which, on the side note, sounds kind of entertaining. Truth be told, I'd pay to see that performance. I wonder how much money he made. So, I think I heard a story that said that this dude went back to go get the Gowrow, and someone would rattle chains, and someone would roar, and he would scream, and then be like, "It's loose," and he'd show up, and he had his clothes all tore, and he's like, "It's escaped," and the whole crowd would just lose their shit. And I just picture that, and I just think it's funny. I mean, probably not at the time, but now I just think it's funny. So, Now we're going to go and talk about one that I really, really like. I just think it's really interesting. And this one is called the White River Monster. So next we're going to be talking about the White River Monster, or Whitey as it is called, and is a Loch Ness-style monster. No one knows for sure when Whitey, technically known as the White River Monster, made his first appearance. However, official sightings have been on record since the early 1900s. In the years since, the mysterious thing with the hide of a wet elephant has been perceived differently. Some people thought it was an overturned boat. Others were convinced it was an oversized fish. Arkansas state legislators officially established its legendary status in 1973 when they created the White River Monster Sanctuary and Retreat, where supposed sightings were common. After all, as one newspaper put it, there aren't that many authentic monsters left in the state waters. Regardless of who or what the monster was or is, the legend continues, there is still interest in the story, says Vicki Schoenwise, park interpreter at Johnson State Park in Newport, Arkansas, who gives presentations on the monster. I'm not necessarily a believer, but I'm not a disbeliever either. We don't know all that's on this earth. The day must have been scary. In 1915, when the Encyclopedia of Arkansas notes that the very first sighting was reported. While later reports are scattered, it seems the monster came to fame again in 1937 when something strange was reported by a number of people. Somewhere in the depths, according to half a dozen eyewitnesses, including a plantation owner, Bramlett Bateman, is the monster, which on rare intervals rises to the surface, floats silently for a few minutes, and then submerges to make its presence known only by occasional strings of bubbles. Printed Michigan's News Palladium paper in July 1937. Soon, the water where sightings were seen became a tourist attraction. Newspapers across the country and around the world gave updates on the monster and local efforts to catch it. The community, and the rest of the world, was anxious to solve the mystery of the monster that some established between 600 to 1,500 pounds and up to 3 car lengths in length. It seems part of the efforts was led by the local Chamber of Commerce. Despite their staunch denials of doing anything for publicity gains, one claim is found in the St. Louis Star and Times newspaper. The Chamber of Commerce, this certainly is not a publicity stunt, built a fence around the search area on one side of the river, erected a booth, and tacked up a sign reading, "Admission, 25 cents. Regardless of motive, the people were drawn. Many, it seems, were more terrified of missing the monster than being harmed by it, although some did come armed. More and more of the curious, many of them bringing guns or cameras, came to the scene. Printed the Moberly Monitor Index newspaper on July 9, 1937. One man even brought a machine gun, but the State Game and Fish Commission has ruled out use of guns and explosives in the investigation. Local leaders also led efforts to solve the mystery. At one point, W.E. Penix, state toll bridge collector, I said Penix, that's with an X, I'm just saying, y'all. At one point, W.E. Penix, the state toll bridge collector, led the charge to round up all available rope to create a giant net to catch the beast of the deep. Penix said he would enlist operators of several motorboats to help him handle the net, printed the Hope Star newspaper. He said he did not expect to land the monster if it was as big as reported, but hoped to entangle it long enough to enable rivermen to identify it. Eventually, the thoughtful Chamber of Commerce decided it was time to solve the mystery once and for all. The organization hired another diver, this time former Navy diver C.R. Brown, to come in and attempt to find the monster. One source says the admission fee was used to help pay for this effort. Around July 23rd, the hunt commenced. For public good, not publicity, all Newport stores arranged to close at noon today in honor of the monster hunt, reported the Evening Citizen newspaper in Ontario, Canada. They even constructed a dance floor and announced that an orchestra would play for the dancers as long as the hunt lasted. The Chamber of Commerce, sponsoring the hunt to refute charges that the monster idea was a publicity scheme, rigged up a loudspeaker system through which Brown related his adventures from the bottom of the river, printed the St. Petersburg Times on July 24th. Numbers vary on how many people were witnesses that day. One report says 300, another 500. Regardless of how many, there was a moment when all eyes thought they had seen what they came for. Some of the approximately 500 spectators at the first day's search thought for a moment they had seen the monster, reported the Weekly Town Talk in Louisiana. Closer examination disclosed the object to be a dead hog floating downstream. Before the real monster could be found, the dive wrapped up. Rains causing muddy water and an accident to the diver's air valve cut the hunt short. Brown's diving suit inflated and he bobbed to the surface like a cork when the accident occurred, reported the Daily Times in Ohio on July 24th. To make his day worse, he also was stuck in the bottom mud for a time and had to be dislodged. On top of that, he wasn't the only one seeking a meeting with the monster. A rival, David Smith, river fisherman, descended into a homemade apparatus consisting of an old gasoline tank, rubber hose, and bicycle pump manned from a boat. He reported no success. Shortly thereafter, the monster disappeared. Believers, though, had an obvious explanation. Those who still retained faith in the existence of the monster were quick to theorize that so much hubbub on the riverbank had frightened the monster away, reported the Kerrville Times in Texas. In the end, the town didn't need expert divers to find an explanation for the White River Monster. Less than 3 years later, one solution made sense when two local brothers caught a 220-pound fish. And, if seeing is believing, locals were able to decide for themselves if they thought it was the real deal. The monster, or the fish, which is 9 feet long and measures 11 inches between the eyes, was placed on exhibition in front of Bob's Meat Market, reported the Baxter Bulletin in January 1940. It's possible that resolution was just too much for one local man to keep quiet. Less than 3 months later, another fellow came forward with a different story. It's preserved in a bulletin article from March 1940. The monster, it seems, was the scheme of a shell digger to frighten competitors away from a cache of valuable shells he had located. The fisherman discovered a bed of sand shells more valuable than ordinary mussel shells because they were exported to be made into knife handles, earrings, and novelties. To frighten away other fishermen and shell diggers, he overturned a boat, hitched it to a set of wires, and tied one end to roots hidden under the water bank. He started the story of the monster in the river. When curious fishermen came down to the river to investigate, the man would slip into the bushes and pull the boat to the top of the water. If there was a crowd on hand, the monster would not appear because the schemer feared his scheme would be discovered. But even then, the monster story wasn't gone. Around 30 years later, the monster was back. The sightings started again, reports noting something with a gray horn sticking out of the water. Later, a trail of 3-toed, 4-inch prints were found in the White River area, notes the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. Crushed vegetation and broken trees were evidence that something large had passed by, and it was assumed that the tracks were whiteys. The next year, legislators took matter into their own hands. A bill was passed in 1973 that created the White River Monster Refuge and Sanctuary, now tied to Jacksonport State Park. A group of locals also plans to declare a song by Timbo's Jimmy Driftwood concerning the monster as the official Refuge and Sanctuary Anthem, printed to Northwest Arkansas Times in an editorial in July 1972. Schoenweis, the park's interpreter, hasn't heard of the anthem, so it's doubtful that that claim came to be. But she does know that people still appreciate the story. She offers presentations and tours she gives on Whitey, even though sightings haven't been reported since the 1970s. Today, she says the legend lives on more for novelty than hard and fast belief. Most people today are doing it for fun, she says of the events at the park. But what was the thing that people saw way back then? Even today, no one knows for sure. Schoenweis says it could have been a log. It could have been a sea creature that ended up in the river by mistake from warmer water, such as an alligator. Maybe it was a very large snapping turtle. Perhaps it was a giant gar, which are known to grow 12 feet in length. They're definitely scary, says Schoenweis. Regardless of if it's there or what it is, though, the park is still a refuge for the white river monster. The story is especially recognized at Christmas when the park displays a decoration about him on the nearby water. He floats out there on the lake throughout the Christmas season, says Schoenweis. The refuge status, however, is something Schoenweis reminds visitors of all year long. She reiterates the fact that people are legally obligated to do it no harm, but that they should most definitely do something else if they see a creature from the deep. Grab a camera because proof is good, she says. I hope that you have enjoyed hearing about a few of the cryptids that are living in the Ozarks. We will be coming back to the Ozarks to do another part because there are so many cryptids and it's just exciting to hear and learn about all of them because I just barely scraped the surface. Please remember that I still want to hear from you. I want to hear your cryptid stories. I want to hear your haunted stories. I just want to hear from you. Feel free to email me at allthingscryptid13@gmail.com. I hope you have a great week. Keep believing in the unknown, and until next time.